A rich man followed the same winter routine in Alaska until a woman broke it. Daniel woke before the sun decided whether it would show itself. The sky outside his cabin stayed blue-black, a color that belonged only to deep winter in Alaska, when night loosened its grip slowly and without apology. He did not need an alarm. He never did. The cabin was quiet, except for the soft complaint of wood tightening against the cold. Daniel sat up, reached for the heavy coat folded at the foot of the bed, and slipped his arm through the sleeve without looking. His hand brushed the old mechanical watch on his wrist. The second hand moved. It always moved. In the kitchen, he ground coffee by hand. Metal against metal. Slow. Even. The sound filled the room the way silence usually did. Black coffee. No sugar. No milk. While the water heated, he made a simple breakfast. Eggs in a cast iron pan. Bread toasted on the stove. A thin slice of cured meat he had hung himself the previous fall. Enough fuel. Nothing wasted. He ate standing up, eyes on the frost webbing across the window, steam from the coffee fogging the glass, and then fading. Outside, the path was already there waiting, the same path it had been every winter. After washing the pan, Daniel opened a thick hardback book on the table. He read a few pages, no more. The book stayed open where he left it, as if he would return in an hour or a day or a year and pick up the sentence exactly where it stopped. The stove popped once, then settled. He pulled on his boots and stepped behind the cabin, where the wood pile leaned against the wall. Daniel split logs with steady strokes, not fast, not slow. Each piece went onto the rack beside the stove, aligned, measured by eye. When the rack was full, he stopped. When it was enough, it was enough. He checked the cabin, the door, the windows, the latch. Everything was where it belonged. Daniel stepped out onto the ice-covered ground and started his walk. No phone, no music, just the compressed crunch of snow under his boots and the steady rhythm of breath in cold air. The landscape did not change, and he did not expect it to. Spruce trees stood frozen in place. The lake lay locked under a sheet of white. The horizon stayed distant and empty. This was the routine, the same winter routine, followed precisely, repeated every year. Daniel was a rich man. The world he came from knew his name, his assets, his reach. Out here, none of that mattered. Out here, he owned only what he carried, what he fixed with his hands, what he could keep warm. He turned back toward the cabin as the light finally began to thin the darkness. Halfway there, he stopped. Not because he heard something, not because he sensed danger, because the ground told him to. Daniel looked down. A footprint cut cleanly through the surface snow, pressed deep enough to show weight. It was not old. The edges had not softened. It was small, too small to be his, too narrow to belong to any man who worked these winters. He followed it with his eyes. Then he saw another, and another, that led away from the tree line, toward the far ridge, toward a place he never walked. Daniel stood still. The cold crept through his coat, unnoticed. His watch kept ticking. The path behind him waited to be retraced, unchanged, familiar. This footprint did not belong to the routine. It had not been here yesterday. It should not be here today. Daniel did not move for a long moment. Then, for the first time that winter, he turned his body in a direction he had never taken before. Daniel did not follow the footprints right away. Alaska taught patience the hard way. Snow hid mistakes until it was too late. He marked the direction with his eyes, then turned back to the cabin first, the way he always did when something did not belong. Cold stayed outside. The moment he opened the door, warmth settled around him again. Not heat, warmth. The kind built slowly from wood, from time, from attention. The stove held a steady glow. The kettle sat where he left it. Light from a single lamp pooled across the wooden floor, stopping just short of the corners, leaving the edges of the cabin untouched. Inside, the world made sense. Daniel hung his coat on the hook by the door. Snow melted in a thin line along the hem and darkened the wood beneath it. He wiped his boots carefully twice before setting them by the wall. The mechanical watch ticked as he reached for the kettle and poured another cup of coffee. Still black, still hot. The dog lifted its head from the rug near the stove. An old husky mix, gray around the muzzle. one ear that never fully stood. The dog did not bark. It never did. It simply watched Daniel with eyes that had learned the shape of routine better than most people ever could. Daniel set a hand briefly on the dog's head as he passed. The dog leaned into it once, then settled back down, satisfied. Outside, the wind moved through the trees without urgency. Snow fell lightly now, small flakes drifting instead of driving. The world beyond the cabin felt vast and empty, but not threatening. It was the kind of emptiness that held together only because it was left alone. Daniel added one log to the stove. Only one, enough to carry the heat through the next hour. He moved through the cabin, checking things he had already checked. The latch on the back window, the spare flashlight, the radio that stayed silent 99 days out of 100. He did not turn it on. The quiet mattered. This was how the winters passed. Cold outside, warm inside, day after day. He sat at the small table and opened the thick book again, turning the page he had folded earlier with care. He read a paragraph, then another. The words stayed on the page. They did not ask anything from him. The dog shifted, nails clicking softly on the floor. Light flickered against the log walls as the stove adjusted. Snow slid from the roof in a low rush, landing out of sight. This place healed by repetition. Every motion here had weight. Every action had a place. Nothing surprised him inside these walls. Daniel closed the book. He looked at the door. The footprints waited out there, cutting through the snow. Interrupting the line he walked every day. They pointed toward a ridge he avoided because there was nothing there he needed. Nothing he had needed. He set the coffee down untouched and pulled the coat back on. This time, he did not hang it first. The watch stayed visible at his wrist, its ticking steady, unbothered by whatever choice he was making. The dog stood as well. "No," Daniel said quietly. The dog sat back down, watching him, head tilted just enough to ask without asking. Daniel opened the door. Cold rushed in. Sharp, clean, immediate. He stepped out and closed the door behind him, sealing the warmth inside. The light from the cabin spilled onto the snow for a moment, then disappeared as he turned away from it. The footprints were clearer now, closer than before. He followed them slowly, matching his steps to theirs without stepping directly into them. The snow told a story if you let it. Wait. Hesitation. A stumble here. A longer stride there. Not an animal. The trail curved toward the trees. The air smelled different there, heavier, carrying the faint scent of old wood and ice. A structure came into view through the branches, barely standing. A cabin, abandoned long enough for the snow to claim it, but not long enough to erase its shape. Daniel stopped at the edge of the clearing. The quiet pressed in. No voices. No movement. Only the wind threading through broken boards. He did not call out. Instead, he listened. The dog's absence was noticeable now. The warmth of the stove felt far away. The routine had stretched thin, but it had not snapped. Not yet. Daniel took one step forward, then another, toward the place where the footprints ended, and the winter held its breath. Daniel did not rush toward the abandoned cabin. He marked its position, the angle of the roof, the way snow had collected heavier on one side than the other. He listened first. Alaska punished people who assumed silence meant safety. Nothing moved. He turned back. The walk to his own cabin followed a slower line now, but it was still measured. Each step placed carefully, each breath controlled. When he reached the door, he stamped the snow from his boots, opened it, and let warmth close around him again. Cold stayed outside. That rule still held. Inside, the dog lifted its head and watched him, then stood and stretched, bones cracking softly. Daniel shut the door, slid the bolt into place, and removed his gloves one finger at a time. He set them on the shelf to dry. Same place. Same order. The routine resumed without announcement. He hung the coat, checked the stove, added one log. The flame adjusted, low and steady. Daniel poured fresh water into the kettle and set it on the heat. He washed his hands longer than necessary, scrubbing snow melt from his knuckles until the skin warmed again. He dried them on a towel that had been folded the same way for years. This was how time worked here. Not by clocks, by sequence. He sat at the table and opened the book again, but he did not read. He let it stay open while his eyes rested on the grain of the wood beneath it. A small scratch ran along the surface, left by a knife years ago. He had never sanded it out. The dog settled near his feet. Outside, the wind picked up slightly. Snow brushed against the walls in a sound that barely registered. Daniel stood and prepared lunch early, even though he was not hungry yet. Soup reheated on the stove, bread cut thick. He ate slowly, tasting nothing, wasting nothing. When he finished, he cleaned the bowl immediately and set it upside down to dry. Discipline lived in the small things. He stepped into the back room, where tools hung in clean lines. He selected a file and began sharpening the axe he had already sharpened 2 days earlier. The blade did not need it. That was not the point. Metal slid against metal in long strokes. Even pressure. No wasted motion. Daniel owned companies that employed thousands of people. He signed documents that moved money most people would never see. None of that showed in the way he held the tool, or the way he adjusted the edge, or the way he wiped the blade clean afterward. Capacity did not announce itself here. When he finished, he returned the axe to its place. He stepped back once to confirm the alignment. Then again, the radio crackled faintly as the wind shifted the antenna outside. Daniel did not turn it on. News would only tell him what he already knew. The world kept moving. Loudly, quickly, without waiting. He stayed where he was. Afternoon light filtered weakly through the window, pale and brief. Daniel split more wood, this time inside the covered shed, stacking it neatly until his shoulders warmed. He stopped when his breath changed. That was the signal. Enough. He removed his gloves and flexed his fingers once before going back inside. As evening approached, the cabin grew quieter, as if the walls themselves were preparing for night. Daniel fed the dog, refilled the water, bowl, and checked the latch on the door again. Not because anything had changed, because routine demanded acknowledgement. He sat by the stove as darkness settled fully outside. The only light came from the fire and a single lamp. Shadows moved slowly across the walls. The footprints came back to him then, not as fear, not as urgency, as information. Someone had walked through his winter. Someone light enough to leave narrow impressions. Someone who had not followed a straight line. Someone who had ended their walk near a cabin that no longer appeared on maps. Daniel looked at the door again. He did not open it. Healing here did not come from solving things immediately. It came from returning again and again to what could be held steady. The dog sighed and rested its head on his boot. Daniel reached down and rested his hand there, feeling warmth, feeling weight, feeling the simple proof of another living body sharing the room. Outside, the abandoned cabin waited. Inside, the fire held. The routine had not broken. It had stretched, and in that stretch, something new had been allowed to exist. The next morning arrived without ceremony. Snow fell lightly, the kind that softened edges instead of burying them. Daniel followed his routine again, not to erase what he had seen, but to anchor the day where it belonged. Coffee, heat, boots by the door, the dog watching without expectation. When he stepped outside, the world felt quieter than the night before. The abandoned cabin stood where it had been, half hidden by trees, its roof bowed under years of weather. Daniel approached this time without stopping at the clearing's edge. He moved slowly, letting the snow speak first. The door was not fully closed. That was new. He paused, listening. Inside, something shifted. Not fast, not panicked, just the sound of weight adjusting, of a body choosing how to exist in the cold. Daniel did not call out. He tapped once on the door frame with his knuckles. Not loud, not soft, enough to be heard. A moment passed. Then a voice came from inside. Steady, low, careful. You can come in. No urgency, no demand, no question. Daniel stepped through the doorway. The woman stood near the back wall, wrapped in layers that did not quite match. A wool sweater too thin for Alaska. A jacket that had once been warm, but had lost its fight with winter. Her hair was pulled back simply, not styled, just controlled enough to stay out of her face. She did not move closer. She did not step back. She held her hands where he could see them, fingers slightly red from the cold, empty. I did not take anything, she said. Not defensive, not apologetic, just information. Dana nodded once. The cabin smelled of old wood and cold air. A small camp stove sat unused near the wall. A blanket folded neatly on a crate. Nothing torn, nothing scattered. Whoever she was, she had not tried to claim the space. I will leave, she added after a moment. I was just warming up. Daniel looked around again. He noticed details without staring. The way she stood angled slightly toward the exit, not blocking it. The way her boots were placed side by side near the wall instead of kicked off. The way her eyes did not roam the cabin, did not measure him, did not search for advantage. What is your name? He asked. Lena. Lena Harper, she said. She did not ask his. That mattered. Daniel set his pack down slowly, making his movements visible. He pulled out a thermos and unscrewed the lid. Steam lifted into the cold space. Coffee, he said. It is hot. Lena hesitated for half a second. Then she nodded. She accepted the cup with both hands, careful not to brush his fingers. She took a small sip, then another. Thank you, she said. She did not ask where he came from. She did not ask why he lived alone. She did not ask how long he planned to stay. The silence settled between them without strain. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. Snow tapped lightly against the cabin's broken window, the sound muffled by age and ice. I will be gone before dark, Lena said. Not as a promise, as a boundary. Daniel considered the distance from here to the nearest town. 30 miles by snowmobile. More on foot. He considered the weather, the way the clouds sat heavy and low. You can stay until the storm passes, he said. It was an offer, not a condition. Lena looked at him then, really looked. She searched his face briefly, not for wealth or status, but for something quieter. Whatever she found, there was enough. All right, she said. She set the cup down carefully on a flat surface. She did not leave it where it could spill. Daniel stepped back toward the door. I will bring supplies, he said. Food. Wood. Lena nodded. I can help, she said, then stopped herself. If you want. He did not answer right away. When he returned with the sled, Lena was outside, stacking the small pile of wood he had left earlier, aligning the pieces the way he did. Almost exactly. She did not look at him when he approached. She finished the row she was working on first. You did not have to, Daniel said. I know, she replied. That was all. They worked side by side without coordination, each aware of the other without intruding. She did not rush. She did not linger. When she was done, she wiped her hands on her pants and stepped back. Inside, Daniel set up a second blanket near the stove, not touching the one she had already folded. He poured soup into a pot and let it heat slowly. Lena watched, then turned away to look out the window, giving him space without being asked. When they ate, they did so quietly, sitting across from each other, the dog curled between them, content with the warmth. Lena ate steadily, not fast, not cautiously. She stopped when she was full. Thank you, she said again. Just once. Daniel nodded. As the light faded and the snow thickened outside, the cabin held steady. Cold stayed beyond the walls. Inside, there was no tension to manage, no performance to maintain. Two people sharing heat. Nothing more. If you have ever walked through winter carrying more than you could name, you understand this kind of silence. The kind that does not ask questions. The kind that does not rush answers. That night, the storm arrived, and Lena stayed. Morning did not arrive all at once. It edged in slowly, gray light pressing against the snow-packed windows, testing the cabin for weakness. The storm had settled into something calmer overnight, leaving the world wrapped and muted. Daniel was awake before the light fully claimed the room. The stove still held heat. He added one log, waited for the flame to catch, then moved quietly so the sound would not carry farther than necessary. The dog lifted its head, tail thumping once against the floor, then rested again. Lena slept on the far side of the room, blanket pulled up to her shoulders, boots lined neatly beneath the bench. She had left space between herself and everything else. Even in rest, she did not take more than she needed. Daniel ground coffee by hand, slower than usual. The sound filled the cabin without breaking it. He poured hot water carefully, watching steam rise and vanish. He cooked breakfast without comment. Eggs, toast, The last of the soup warmed on the stove. He set the food on the table and waited. Lena woke on her own. She sat up, blinked once, and took in the room without surprise. She stood, folded the blanket the way she had found it, and set it back in place. "Good morning," she said. Daniel nodded. "Coffee." She accepted the cup the same way she had the night before. Both hands. No ruse. She took a sip and let the warmth do its work before speaking again. "Thank you for letting me stay," she said. He shrugged lightly. The storm made the choice. That was not an invitation to talk further. It was enough. They ate at the table, sitting across from each other. No music, no radio, just the quiet rhythm of forks on plates and the occasional pop from the stove. Lena ate steadily, pausing only to sip coffee. She did not look around the cabin as if taking inventory. She did not ask questions. Outside, snow slid from the roof in soft sheets. After breakfast, Daniel stood and cleared the dishes. Lena rose as well, reaching for the plates. Their hands stopped inches apart. She stepped back immediately, giving him room. "I can wash," she said. "I have it," he replied. She nodded and moved to the window instead, looking out at the white stretch beyond the glass. She did not press her face to it. She stood far enough back to avoid leaving a mark. The quiet held. Daniel washed the dishes and set them to dry. He pulled on his coat and gloves. "I'm going to check the path," he said. "I will stay here," Lena replied. He paused, then nodded once. Not agreement. Acknowledgement. Outside, the world was clean and still. Snow reached nearly to his knees in places, smoothing the ground into unfamiliar shapes. Daniel walked the perimeter of the cabin, checking the windward. Side the woodpile, the sled. Everything held. When he returned, Lena was sweeping the floor with a small hand broom he rarely used. She had moved the chairs just enough to reach beneath them, then placed them back exactly where they had been. "You did not have to," Daniel said. "I know," she replied again. They stood there for a moment, the space between them filled with nothing urgent. As the day unfolded, they shared the cabin without negotiating it. Daniel split wood. Lena mended a tear in her jacket near the sleeve with careful stitches. He fed the dog. She refilled the water bowl without asking where it belonged. They spoke only when needed. "Snow is easing," Daniel said once. "I noticed," Lena replied. Later, when the light faded earlier than expected, Daniel lit the lamp. Lena adjusted the wick slightly, just enough to steady the flame, then stepped back. There was no storytelling, no explanation, no history offered. The warmth came from small consistencies, from not interrupting, from leaving space untouched. As evening settled, Daniel set soup on the stove again. "You will need to leave tomorrow," he said, not as a warning, as information. Lena nodded. "I know." She did not ask where she would go. She did not ask if she could stay longer. They ate dinner as the sky darkened beyond the windows, the storm finally spent. The dog rested between them, content. Afterward, Daniel stood and checked the latch on the door. Lena gathered her things and placed them by the bench, ready, but not rushed. "You live far out," she said quietly, not probing, just stating a fact. "Yes," Daniel replied. "That is good," she said. He did not ask why. That night, they sat by the stove, the fire casting slow-moving light across the walls. The cabin held steady, neither crowded nor empty. If you have ever shared a room with someone who knows how to be careful, you understand this kind of first contact. No stories traded, no curiosity demanded, just two people existing in the same warmth, trusting the silence to hold. Outside, Alaska stretched wide and indifferent. Inside, the quiet remained intact. The morning Lena Harper was supposed to leave, the snow stopped falling. Not suddenly, not cleanly. It thinned, then faded, leaving the land sharpened and bright, every line exposed. Daniel Frost watched it from the window a while. The kettle warmed, the husky stretched, and the cabin held its shape the way it always did. Routine stayed intact. Coffee by hand. Black. No sugar. Breakfast simple. Eggs. Toast. He set 2 plates on the table without comment, then waited. Lena entered the room already dressed, jacket zipped, boots laced. She did not look surprised by the second plate. She sat, nodded once, and ate. They spoke only when a moment required it. "The road should be clear," Daniel said. I will walk part of it, Lena replied. He nodded. After they finished, Daniel cleared the table, washed the dishes, and set them to dry. He checked the latch, lifted his pack, and stepped outside without announcing anything else. Lena followed. The light was hard and clean now, the kind that turns snow into glare. Daniel pulled the sled from behind the cabin and began loading it. Wood first, tools second, a coil of rope, a small generator he had repaired years ago and never used. He did not rush. He did not explain. Lena watched for a moment. Then she stepped closer and took the other end of the rope when he handed it to her. She did not ask what it was for. She did not ask where they were going. They moved. The abandoned cabin stood quiet in daylight, its damage easier to read. Roof sagging, door frame warped, snow packed deep against one wall. Daniel circled once, slow, scanning. He set the generator down and knelt, brushing snow away from a frozen vent with his glove. Lena stayed where she was. Daniel worked. He cleared ice from a hinge, tightened a loose board, reset a latch with a measured strike of his hammer. He checked the interior without stepping fully inside, then stepped back out. The work was precise and unhurried, the kind of work done by someone who did not need to prove speed or strength. Lena observed without hovering. At one point, Daniel paused to retighten the strap on his glove. Lena bent, lifted the generator a few inches to level it on the packed snow, then stepped back. She did not ask if it was heavy. She did not say thank you when he nodded once. The husky lay down in the sun and watched them both. After an hour, Daniel started the generator. It sputtered, then settled into a steady hum. Light flickered on inside the abandoned cabin. Not bright. Enough. He shut it off again. The silence returned. Lena finally spoke. It will hold. Yes, Daniel said. That was all. They worked another hour. He stacked wood under the eaves, aligning it with care. She swept snow away from the door, clearing a path just wide enough. When her hands went still, she stepped back and waited. When he finished, Daniel wiped his hands on his coat and looked at the cabin one last time. Then he turned away. They walked back toward his place, the sled lighter now. Halfway there, Lena stopped. I'm not leaving today, she said. It was not a request, not an announcement. It was placed between them like a fact set down gently. Daniel did not stop walking. He nodded once and continued. Back at the cabin, Daniel unhooked the sled and carried the tools inside. He set them in their places, checked the stove, and added one log. He poured water, set the kettle on the heat, and moved as if the day had always been shaped this way. Lena removed her boots and lined them where they belonged. She did not ask what he was doing next. Daniel stepped into the back room and returned with a small notebook. He sat on the table, opened to a blank page, and wrote a list. Short lines. No dates. No taites. He tore the page out and folded it once. He placed it near Lena's side of the table. Supplies, he said. Lena looked at the list. Nails. Lamp oil. Batteries. Flour. Dog food. She did not smile. She did not question why he already had most of it. I will be back before dark, she said. Daniel nodded. She took her coat, paused, then turned back. I will lock the door, she added. Yes, Daniel said. When she left, the cabin did not feel emptier. Daniel sat at the table and opened his book, then closed it again without reading. He stood, pulled on his gloves, and stepped outside. He shoveled the path he always shoveled, even though it was already clear. He split wood that did not need splitting. He checked the generator again, adjusted a bolt by fraction, then stopped. He waited. When Lena returned, it was late afternoon. Snow dusted her shoulders. She set the supplies on the bench and removed her gloves slowly, flexing her fingers once. Daniel took the bag without comment and stored everything where it belonged. They prepared dinner together without planning it. He chopped. She stirred. The husky waited. They ate as daylight drained from the sky, the lamp throwing a warm circle across the table. The wind returned, low and steady, brushing the walls without demand. After dinner, Daniel wiped the table. Lena washed the pot. They switched places without speaking. Later, Daniel stepped outside to check the latch again. When he came back in, Lena had moved the chair slightly closer to the stove. Not his chair, hers. She sat with her hands folded, looking at the fire, not at him. You do not have to fix everything, she said quietly. Daniel did not respond. She did not repeat it. The fire popped once. The husky shifted and settled again. That night, as Daniel checked the lock for the last time, he noticed something he had not expected. The routine had not been interrupted. It had expanded, and the question that remained was not who Lena Harper was, or why she stayed. It was how long a man who did not need to work would continue choosing to do the work anyway. The days that followed settled into a shape neither of them named. Morning arrived with the same pale light. Daniel Frost rose first, as always. Coffee ground by hand. Water heated slowly. The husky shifted, then slept again. Lena Harper woke later, never startled, never rushed. She folded her blanket. She stood near the window until the room felt awake. They shared the cabin without negotiating it. Distance remained. Not wide, not narrow, measured. When Daniel split wood, Lena stayed far enough back that the arc of the axe never came close to her hands. When Lena cooked, Daniel kept to the counter opposite, slicing, wiping, placing tools back exactly where they belonged. Their paths crossed only when they meant them to. Outside, Alaska breathed in long intervals. Snow hardened overnight, then softened under the afternoon sun. Wind passed through the trees without direction. The lake stayed sealed, a sheet of white that reflected everything and explained nothing. Daniel worked as if work were simply the next step in a sentence that had started long before this place. He repaired what did not need repair. He cleared paths already clear. He measured, tightened, aligned. His movements were calm, intentional, contained. Lena noticed. She noticed the way he paused before lifting anything heavy, not because of effort, but because he chose when weight entered his hands. She noticed the way he looked at the horizon before turning back, as if checking a line only he could see. She noticed the watch on his wrist, mechanical, unadorned, never checked for time, only for confirmation. She did not ask about it. Silence held, but it began to press. Not with noise, with awareness. At the table, their eyes met more often now, briefly, then moved away. Not avoidance. Calibration. One afternoon, Daniel returned from the shed with snow dusting his shoulders. Lena stood by the stove, stirring soup slowly. She did not step aside when he passed behind her. He did not touch her to announce himself. They adjusted, both of them, by inches. The husky watched. Later, Daniel set a second log by the stove and paused. He did not add it. He set it down and stepped back. Lena saw the choice and said nothing. That night, the wind rose harder than before. It pushed against the cabin, tested seams, rattled the latch. Daniel checked the door twice. He did not wake Lena. He returned to his chair and sat, hands resting on his knees, eyes on the fire. Lena woke anyway. She sat up, listened, then stood and joined him without asking why he was awake. She did not sit too close. She did not sit far. The space between them warmed gradually, not from heat, but from stillness. "You can sleep," Daniel said quietly. "I know," Lena replied. She stayed. Minutes passed, maybe more. If you're listening right now, take a breath. Not a deep one, just enough to feel the air reach your chest, then leave again. Alaska teaches that pace. Nothing forced, nothing held too long. The fire shifted. The husky sighed. The silence did not break, but it changed texture. Daniel stood and adjusted the latch one more time. When he turned back, Lena was watching him, not directly, but through the reflection in the window. Their eyes met there, doubled by glass, framed by snow and darkness. He looked away first. The next day, tension followed them outside. They walked together toward the tree line, not side by side, not single file. Close enough to hear each other breathe. Far enough that footsteps did not overlap. The abandoned cabin waited in the distance, unchanged. Daniel stopped short of it. Lena took one more step, then stopped too. He lifted his hands slightly, palm open. Not a command, a boundary. She nodded once. They stood there, the cold biting sharper in the open space, the wind carrying sound away. Daniel scanned the roofline, the drift patterns, the door. Lena watched his face, not for fear, but for decision. "You do not have to go farther," he said. "I know," she replied. She did not step back. She did not step forward. The moment passed. They returned without finishing the walk. Back at the cabin, Daniel poured water and set the kettle on the heat. Lena removed her gloves and set them near the stove. Their hands hovered near the same space. Neither moved. The kettle whistled softly. Daniel turned it off. The space remained unclaimed. That evening, Lena spoke again just once. "You work like you were listening for something," she said. Daniel did not answer. She did not ask again. Night fell early. The lamp glowed. Snow returned, light and steady. Daniel wrote a short list in his notebook, then closed it without tearing the page out. Lena read by the fire, the book resting on her knee, not open long enough to finish a chapter. The husky shifted positions, then slept. If you have ever lived inside quiet long enough, you know this moment. When nothing is wrong, but nothing is resolved. When space holds possibility and pressure at the same time. Take another slow breath. The cabin held. Daniel checked the latch once more before bed. Lena turned the lamp down slightly, not asking if the light bothered him. It did not. They lay down on opposite sides of the room, the distance unchanged. Outside, Alaska stayed wide and indifferent. Inside, the silence had weight now. Not enough to break them. Enough to make the next choice matter. The morning opened clean and pale, the kind that made distance feel honest. Daniel Frost woke first, as he always did. He did not move right away. He listened to the cabin breathe. The stove held heat from the night before. The husky slept with its nose tucked under its tail. Lena Harper lay still on the far side of the room, awake but not. Moving, as if waiting for the day to choose its shape. Daniel rose and began the routine. Coffee ground by hand. Water heated slowly. 2 cups set out evenly spaced. He did not look toward her when he did it. Lena stood when the kettle finished, folded her blanket, and set it aside. She washed her hands and took the cup without comment. The steam lifted between them and vanished. They drank in silence. Outside, the snow had crusted overnight. Sunlight caught the surface and scattered it in a glare. Daniel stepped out to check the path. Lena followed a few steps behind, stopping where the packed snow gave way to drifts. "I will go into town," she said. Daniel turned. He waited for the rest of the sentence. It did not come. When he asked, "Today," Lena replied. "Before dark." He nodded. Not permission. Acknowledgement. They prepared without discussion. Daniel packed supplies the way he always did, placing weight evenly, tying knots he had tied 1,000 times. Lena gathered her gloves, her jacket, her small pack. She did not ask to borrow anything. She did not offer explanations. At the door, Daniel paused and reached to the hook beside it. He took down an extra scarf, thick wool, neutral in color. He held it out. Lena looked at it, then at him. "I will bring it back," she said. "Yes," Daniel replied. She wrapped it once around her neck, not twice, and stepped outside. The husky rose and followed her to the threshold, stopping there, waiting for Daniel's cue. Daniel gave none. The dog sat and watched Lena go. The distance between the cabin and the tree lean widened with every step she took. Daniel returned inside. He worked through the day in segments. Wood, tools, a short walk along the ridge that overlooked the lake. He did not go far. He did not go fast. When the sun shifted, he shifted with it. When the wind changed direction, he closed the vent by a fraction. Boundaries held. By mid-afternoon, clouds thickened. Snow threatened, but did not fall. Daniel set a pot on the stove and let it warm. He did not add anything yet. He checked the latch. He set another log by the fire and waited. Lena returned as the light thinned. She stamped snow from her boots and set them where they belonged. She removed the scarf and folded it once, then set it on the bench, not handing it back yet. She took off her gloves and rubbed her hands together to warm them. "The road is clear," she said. Daniel nodded. She set her pack down and removed a small bundle wrapped in paper. "Bread. Fresh. Still warm." "I traded," she added, then stopped. Daniel accepted the bread without comment. He placed it on the table, cut 2 slices, and set the rest aside. He finished the soup and brought the pot to a low simmer. They ate standing, the way they had before, but closer now, shoulders angled toward the same warmth. Their elbows did not touch. Their hands did not reach for the same space. Afterward, Lena picked up the scarf and held it out. "Thank you," she said. Daniel took it and hung it back on the hook. They moved through the evening with small adjustments. Daniel showed Lena where he kept extra candles. Not all of them, just enough. Lena showed Daniel a loose hinge on the back cabinet. He fixed it with one turn of the screwdriver and closed the door again. Outside, the wind returned, low and steady. They sat by the stove as darkness settled. The husky lay between them, closer to Lena this time, its head resting against her boot. She did not move it. Daniel noticed and did not react. Minutes passed. "There's a line past the ridge," Lena said quietly. "The snow changes there." Daniel nodded. "I know." She did not ask why he did not go farther. He did not say why he sometimes did. Trust arrived in small increments. Not spoken, not promised, placed and tested by use. Later, Daniel stood to check the latch. Lena did not follow him with her eyes this time. She watched the fire instead. "You can lock it," he said. She looked up, surprised, then nodded. She rose, slid the bolt into place, and returned to her chair. Daniel did not check it after. If you're listening, let your shoulders drop a fraction. Not all the way, just enough to feel where you are sitting. Boundaries work that way. They do not disappear. They soften when they are respected. The night held steady. When they prepared for sleep, Daniel set the lamp lower than usual. Lena noticed and did not adjust it. The husky turned, twice before settling. They lay down on opposite sides of the room. The distance the same, the air between them changed. Outside, Alaska stayed cold and wide. Inside, the cabin held new arrangement. Nothing resolved. One boundary honored. One small trust placed. Morning returned with movement this time. Not loud, not urgent, just enough to disturb the stillness Daniel Frost had grown, used to measuring in hours. Wind pressed harder against the cabin walls. Snow slid from the roof in heavier sheets. Somewhere beyond the trees, ice cracked and settled again. Daniel rose before first light. The routine began as it always did, but it did not land the same way. He ground coffee by hand, set water to heat, reached for 2 cups. He paused there, only for a moment, then placed them on the table anyway. Lena Harper was already awake, sitting on the bench near the window, pulling on her boots slowly. She looked up when the kettle sounded and nodded once. No words needed. They drank coffee while standing this time, not at the table. Outside, the world felt restless, as if Alaska itself were shifting its weight. When Daniel stepped out to check the perimeter, Lena followed without asking. The husky trotted ahead of them, ears alert, tail steady. The path they had cleared days before was still visible, but the edges had softened. New snow layered over old tracks. The abandoned cabin stood farther away than it had yesterday, or maybe it only felt that way. Daniel stopped short of the tree lean. Something lay half-buried near the bend in the path. Not large, not moving. Lena saw it at the same time he did. They approached without hurry. A snowmobile sled had tipped on its side, one runner bent, awkwardly underweight, it could not hold. A pack lay open beside it, contents spilled and half-frozen. No person in sight. Daniel crouched and touched the metal frame once, testing it. Cold burned his glove. He withdrew his hand and stood. Lena scanned the trees, listening. Nothing. They did not call out. Daniel righted the sled with measured effort. He adjusted the runner by inches, not enough to fix it, only enough to make it usable. He gathered the spilled items and packed them neatly, tying the straps tight. Lena stood watch, eyes moving with the tree lean, not with him. After a moment, she pointed. A faint set of footprints veered off toward the ridge, uneven, dragging slightly. They did not go far, she said. Daniel nodded. They left the sled upright, positioned so it would be seen from the path. Daniel placed a strip of bright fabric from his pack on a branch nearby. Not a signal, a marker. They turned back without following the tracks. It was not rescue in the way stories like to tell it. No chasse, no dramatic return, just a small correction made before something worse happened. Back at the cabin, the routine resumed. Daniel split wood. Lena swept snow from the steps. The husky settled near the stove. But the rhythm had shifted. At midday, Daniel removed his gloves and reached into the pocket of his coat. He paused, then pulled out a phone he had not touched since arriving. No case, no notifications lit the screen. It vibrated once in his hand. He looked at it. Lena noticed, not because he reacted, but because he did not. Daniel set the phone face down on a shelf by the door and returned to the woodpile. He split 2 more logs, stacked them, then stopped. The phone did not vibrate again. Nothing was said. Later, as snow began to fall again, Lena brought the notebook from the table and set it near Daniel while he sharpened the axe. "There is a page folded," she said. Daniel glanced at it. "I know." She did not open it. They ate dinner earlier than usual. Bread toasted. Soup warmed. The husky received its portion first. Daniel watched Lena tear her slice of bread in half and set the larger piece aside without comment. He slid it back toward her. She did not argue. She took it. Outside, wind pressed harder, pushing snow sideways now. The cabin lights glowed warmer by contrast. That evening, Daniel adjusted the lamp higher than he had the night before. Lena noticed. She shifted her chair closer to the table instead of the stove. Small changes. Not discussed. As darkness settled fully, a distant engine sound carried through the trees. Brief. Faint. Then gone. Lena lifted her head. "Someone found it," she said. Daniel nodded. They did not go outside to look. The routine held, but it did not close back on itself the way it used to. It had room now for interruption. For response. For the choice not to act when action was unnecessary. Before bed, Daniel checked the latch. He did not check it twice. Lena turned the lamp down herself this time. Daniel did not stop her. If you're listening, notice the way this day moved. Not faster, just differently. The kind of difference that tells you something underneath has shifted, even if nothing on the surface looks dramatic. Outside, Alaska continued on its own terms. Snow fell. Wind passed. Tracks layered over tracks until no single path could claim the ground. Inside, the cabin carried a new pattern. The same routine. Not the same man. The consequence did not arrive as noise. It arrived as weight. Daniel Frost noticed it in his shoulder first. A dull resistance when he lifted the axe the next morning. Not pain, just information. He adjusted his grip, split 1 log instead of 2, and stacked it carefully. The routine bent, but it did not break. Lena Harper saw the change without naming it. She set the kettle on the stove and waited an extra second before pouring. She placed the mug closer to Daniel than before, then stepped back. No questions, no concerns spoken out loud. Outside, the wind stayed low and constant. Snow moved sideways, not down. The world pressed, but did not intrude. After breakfast, Daniel reached for his coat. "I will check the path," he said. Lena nodded. "I will stay close." That was new. They walked together toward the bend where they had found the tipped sled. The husky moved ahead, then circled back, keeping them in sight. The marker Daniel had left was gone. In its place, fresh tracks cut across the snow, deeper and heavier than before. Someone had been there. Daniel stopped and crouched, pressing his gloved hand into the track. He looked toward the ridge. The tracks led away cleanly this time. Steady, purposeful. Lena exhaled once slow. They got out. "Yes," Daniel said. The consequence sat there between them. Small. Contained. A choice made days earlier had shifted someone else's path, and that path had brushed theirs again. They did not follow. On the way back, Daniel slipped on a patch of ice he would have avoided a week ago. Not a fall. A stumble. Enough to jar his shoulder and force him to pause. Lena stepped closer without touching him, her body angled so she could catch him if he needed it. He steadied himself on his own. "I am fine," he said. "I know," she replied. The distance between them narrowed by inches and stayed there. Back at the cabin, Daniel removed his coat more slowly. He rotated his shoulder once, then again, testing range without comment. Lena turned away and began slicing bread, giving him space without retreating. They worked through the afternoon differently. Daniel limited his movements. One task at a time. No unnecessary lifts. Lena took over carrying water from the back room without announcing it. She set the bucket down where Daniel would have, aligned to the grain of the floor. When he noticed, he said nothing. Later, the phone vibrated again. This time, Lena was in the room. Daniel reached into his pocket and placed the phone on the table between them. Face down. It vibrated once more, then stopped. Lena looked at it, then at him. Her expression did not change. "You do not have to answer," she said. Daniel nodded. He did not pick it up. That evening, the wind rose harder, pushing snow against the windows in steady waves. Daniel checked the latch and stopped himself from checking it twice. He sat instead, resting his arm on the table, fingers relaxed. Lena brought him a cup of coffee he had not asked for. She set it down gently, then took the chair across from him, not beside him. "You work today?" she said, not accusing, not impressed. "Yes," Daniel replied. She waited. When nothing followed, she nodded. The small consequence continued into the night. Daniel woke once, adjusting his shoulder with care. Lena was already awake, sitting on the bench, wrapped in her sweater, watching the snow shift outside. "You should rest it," she said quietly. "I will," he replied. She did not suggest how. The next morning, the path outside was partially buried again. New snow layered over old tracks, softening the evidence of movement. Daniel stood at the window longer than usual, then turned back to the room. He did not reach for the axe. Instead, he sat and opened his book. He read 2 pages this time, not one, then closed it. Lena watched without comment. Later, a snowmobile passed in the distance, its sound low and brief. The husky lifted its head, ears alert, then settled again. Daniel did not move. The consequence did not demand action. It demanded adjustment. By evening, the cabin felt closer. Not crowded. Focused. The fire burned lower. The lamp stayed dimmer. Daniel placed the phone in the drawer instead of on the shelf. Lena noticed and said nothing. If you're listening, this is where change often hides. Not in the moment something happens, but in the quiet decisions that follow. In the way a man who does not need to carry weight chooses to set it down anyway. In the way someone else notices and does not rush to fill the space. The night settled. Daniel checked the latch once. Lena turned the lamp down a fraction. They slept with the same distance between them, but the air carried something new. Not resolution, just cost acknowledged. And a relationship that had shifted one careful inch at a time. The realization did not arrive as a thought. It arrived as alignment. Daniel Frost noticed it in the way the cabin sounded when he woke. Not quieter, more precise. The stove breathed evenly. The wind passed without rattling the latch. The husky slept deeper than usual, chest rising slow and sure. Daniel stayed still for a moment longer than he normally would. When he stood, he did not reach for the axe. He reached for the kettle. Coffee by hand. Black. Measured. He set out 2 cups, then stopped himself. He set out one. After a pause, he set out the second again, not correcting the first choice, not erasing it, just allowing both to exist. Lena Harper woke as the kettle finished. She folded her blanket, washed her hands, and stood near the table without sitting. She took the cup when he offered it. Their fingers did not touch. Outside, the sky held that pale winter blue that made distance look honest. They drank in silence. Daniel felt the weight in his shoulder again, lighter than yesterday, present enough to remind him. He adjusted the strap on his watch, not to check the time, but to feel the pressure settle where it belonged. He looked toward the door. "I will go to the ridge," he said. Lena nodded. "I will be here." It was not permission. It was position. He dressed slowly, deliberately. Coat, gloves, boots. He checked the latch once, then opened the door and stepped into the cold. The husky rose, waited, then sat. Back down when Daniel shook his head. The walk to the ridge took longer than usual. Daniel did not hurry it. Snow had crusted again overnight, breaking underfoot with clean, honest sound. He followed the familiar line until it thinned, then continued a few steps beyond it, not far enough to challenge the boundary, far enough to acknowledge it. From the ridge, the lake stretched wide and sealed. Tracks layered across it now, faint and temporary. Nothing stayed long out here unless it chose to. Daniel stood with his hands at his sides. If you're listening, pause here. Let your breath settle where it naturally falls. No connection, no effort. Just notice. Daniel noticed something simple. The routine he had built was not protection anymore. It was capacity. He had room. Not because anything had been fixed. Not because the world had softened. Because the routine no longer closed in on itself. It could hold interruption without breaking. It could carry another presence without losing shape. He turned back before the cold asked him to decide. When he returned, Lena was at the table, the notebook open, not reading, not writing, just touching the paper as if confirming it existed. She looked up when he entered, then closed the notebook without asking what he had found. "You will stay for lunch," she said. Daniel nodded. Yes. They prepared the meal together without choreography. He chopped. She stirred. The husky waited. Steam fogged the window, then cleared. Bread toasted. Soup warmed. They ate seated this time, across from each other, the table between them steady and familiar. Afterward, Daniel reached for the phone drawer. He opened it. The phone lay inside, face dark. He did not pick it up. He slid the drawer, closed again. Lena saw the movement. She did not comment. She stood and carried the bowls to the sink, washing them with care. Later, the wind shifted again, carrying a distant sound from the road. An engine. Brief. Then gone. Daniel did not move. He took the scarf from the hook and folded it once more than necessary, then placed it back exactly where it had been. He adjusted the lamp, lowering it slightly, then raised it back to its previous position. The realization continued to settle, not as certainty, but as permission. Lena sat by the window, boots off, sweater pulled close. She did not watch him. She watched the snow change texture as light shifted across it. "You can choose the pace," she said quietly. Daniel did not answer right away. When he did, it was not explanation. "I know," she nodded. That was enough. Evening arrived without announcement. The cabin warmed. The fire burned low and even. Daniel added one log, not two. Lena moved her chair an inch closer to the table, not to him. They shared the space without asking it to become anything else. If you're listening, this is the opening, not a story, of a wider circle. When you stop forcing meaning and allow pattern to speak for itself. When you notice what remains steady even as conditions change. Night settled. Daniel checked the latch once and left it at that. Lena turned the lamp down slightly and stopped there. They lay down on opposite sides of the room, the distance unchanged, the air between them clearer. No declarations, no revelations. Just a man who had realized he no longer needed the routine to keep the world out. And a woman who respected the moment enough not to ask him to step through it before he was ready. Morning returned the way it always had. Pale light pressed against the snow. The cabin held its shape. The wind moved through the trees without asking permission. Alaska remained Alaska. Daniel Frost woke before the sun decided anything. He lay still for a moment, listening. The stove breathed evenly. The husky slept, weight settled familiar. Nothing demanded attention. He rose. The routine resumed. Coffee ground by hand. Metal against metal. Slow. Even. Water heated. Steam lifted. The first cup filled. Then the second. He placed them on the table without pausing this time. No correction. No reconsideración. Lena Harper woke quietly and folded her blanket. She washed her hands and stood near the table, waiting for the kettle to finish. She took the cup when he offered it. Their fingers did not touch. The space between them did not shrink or widen. It held. Outside, the path lay clear and white, edged softly by new snow. Daniel pulled on his coat and boots, checked the latch once, and stepped outside. Lena followed, stopping where the packed snow ended. The husky walked ahead, then circled back, content. Daniel split wood. The axe rose and fell with the same measured rhythm as always, one log at a time. No hiri, no stran. He stopped when his shoulders signaled enough and stacked the pieces carefully. Lena brought a bucket of water and set it down where he would have placed it himself. He nodded. She nodded back. Inside, he checked the stove and added one log. Not two. The flame adjusted and held. He set the book on the table and read a few pages. This time, he did not mark the page. He closed it when the moment felt complete. Lena moved through the cabin with quiet familiarity. She swept the floor once, not twice. She aligned the chairs, then left them alone. She stood at the window and watched the light shift across the snow, then turned away before it asked anything of her. At midday, they ate a simple meal. Bread, soup, nothing wasted. They sat across from each other, the table steady between them. The husky rested nearby, head on its paws. Afterward, Daniel reached for his gloves. "I will walk the line," he said. Lena nodded. "I will stay." He stepped outside and followed the path he had followed every winter. The same turns, the same distances. He did not go farther than before. He had not stopped short. The ridge rose and fell in the distance. Tracks layered over tracks and disappeared. From the edge, he looked out and then turned back without standing too long. When he returned, Lena had placed the notebook back on the shelf. Closed. The phone drawer remained shut. The lamp stayed where it was. They worked through the afternoon in parallel. Daniel repaired a loose board on the steps. Lena mended a seam in her jacket. The husky watched and slept. The routine repeated, but it no longer closed in around itself. It breathed. Evening arrived with the same early darkness. The lamp glowed warm. The fire burned low and even. Daniel set the scarf back on the hook after folding it once, not twice. Lena noticed and said nothing. They ate dinner quietly. Afterward, Daniel wiped the table. Lena washed the pot. They switched places without comment and finished the tasks without overlap. Later, the wind brushed the cabin walls and moved on. Daniel checked the latch once and left it at that. Lena adjusted the lamp slightly and stopped. If you're listening, this is the return that matters. Not the kind that brings you back to who you were, but the kind that lets you inhabit the same actions with a different weight. The same steps, the same tools, a wider circle inside them. Night settled. They lay down on opposite sides of the room, the distance unchanged. The air between them held warmth without pressure. Alaska stayed quiet. The cabin held steady. The routine returned, and it carried something new without announcing it. The last night arrived without announcement. Snow fell lightly, almost politely, as if Alaska itself were easing its breath. The cabin stood steady, light glowing through the window, a small square of warmth held against the dark. Daniel Frost finished his routine the way he always did. The stove was fed one final log. The kettle was emptied, dried, and set back in place. The axe rested where it belonged. The latch was checked once, not twice. Lena Harper sat at the table with the book closed in front of her, hands resting on the cover, not reading, not waiting. The husky lay between them, stretched out, asleep, unbothered. Daniel moved through the room without sound and took his chair. He did not sit immediately. He looked around instead. The walls, the window, the door, everything where it had always been, and yet not the same. Lena looked up. Their eyes met, held briefly, then moved away without effort. Outside, the wind shifted direction, then settled. Snow brushed the roof and slid off in a soft rush. Somewhere far off, a sound carried and disappeared before it could be named. They did not speak. They did not need to. The quiet held them both, not as distance, but as shared space. The kind that does not ask to be filled. Daniel reached for the book and slid it closer to the center of the table. Not toward her, not away. Lena noticed and left it there. The lamp cast a warm circle that did not reach the corners. Shadows stayed soft. Nothing pressed. If you're listening now, this is the moment to let your breath slow. Not because the story demands it, because the room does. Daniel stood and moved toward the door. He paused, then turned back. "The snow will be lighter tomorrow," he said. Lena nodded. Yes, that was all. He checked the latch again out of habit, then stopped himself, and left it as it was. He returned to his side of the room and removed his coat, folding it with care. Lena adjusted the lamp lower, just enough to soften the light. They prepared for sleep without ceremony. Daniel lay down where he always had. Lena settled on the opposite side, the distance unchanged, the air between them calm and warm. The husky shifted once and sighed, finding a deeper rest. Outside, Alaska continued on its own terms. Snow fell. Wind moved. Tracks layered over tracks until no single path remained. Inside, the routine held, but it no longer closed the door on what might come next. Daniel lay awake for a moment longer than usual, not counting time, not measuring breath, just listening to the way the cabin held sound now, how it no longer echoed the same way. He did not reach for the phone. He did not reach for anything. Lena turned slightly in her sleep the blanket shifting, then stilled again. Daniel noticed and let the moment pass. If you're listening, this is where the night carries you forward. Not to an answer, not to a promise, just a rest. The story does not end here. It pauses. In the quiet of a cabin where the routine still exists, but no longer stand alone. In a place where two lives move at their own pace, side by side, without demand. Alaska remains wide and patient. And when morning comes again, the choice of how to meet, it will still be waiting. Sleep well. And if you wish, you can return here tomorrow.